I took care of my dad alone for years. Then he left his entire estate to his new wife. I never thought I would be the one left behind. Not after everything I had done. When my father first started getting sick, no one rushed in to help. No aunts, no uncles, no distant cousins suddenly eager to do their part. My siblings, they were ghosts, always too busy, always making excuses. My older brother Greg lived 2 states away and called just enough to keep up appearances, but never enough to actually do anything meaningful. My sister Lauren had washed her hands of him years ago, claiming she couldn't deal with the emotional toll of watching our father decline. And me? I was the one who stayed. I was the one who took him to every doctor's appointment, who sat in cold waiting rooms flipping through outdated magazines while he dozed beside me, frail and exhausted. I was the one who learned how to manage his medications, who listened carefully to the doctors as they explained what each prescription did and what side effects to watch out for. I was the one who woke up in the middle of the night when he called out, struggling to breathe, or when he was too weak to make it to the bathroom on his own. I was the one who gave up promotions, personal ambitions, and relationships because he needed me. And I did it all without question, without hesitation, without expecting anything in return, except maybe the unspoken promise that, in the end, it would matter, that I would matter. But when the will was read, that illusion shattered. Because my father, the man I had cared for through his worst days, through his pain, through his fear, had left everything to her, his new wife, Sharon. A woman who had only been in his life for 3 years. A woman who had breezed in when he was already sick, already dying, and somehow positioned herself as the only one who mattered. The house, the savings, the assets, everything. Not a single thing left for me, not even a mention. Like I had never existed at all. The lawyer's office felt unbearably small, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on my chest like an iron vice. Sharon sat across from me, dry-eyed, hands folded neatly in her lap like she had expected this outcome. Like it was only natural that my father's entire life should belong to her now. Greg and Lauren sat beside me, looking uncomfortable but not surprised. I could feel them both shifting in their chairs, their guilt hanging in the air like a thick fog. It was Greg who finally spoke, clearing his throat. "Look, I know this isn't what you were expecting, but it is what it is." I turned to him, slowly, feeling something sharp and venomous coil inside me. "It is what it is?" Lauren sighed, rubbing her temple. "We all knew Dad was—" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Fond of Sharon. It makes sense he would want to provide for her." I let out a humorless laugh. Provide for her? He gave her everything. I spent years taking care of him. Years. I put my life on hold for him while you two pretended like he didn't exist. And he couldn't even leave me so much thank you. Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I get it. But maybe we just have to accept this and move on." I stared at him, disbelief crashing over me like a tidal wave. "Accept it?" Sharon, who had been quiet up until now, finally spoke. Her voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of tone that belonged to someone who always landed on their feet. "I understand that you're upset, but your father made his decision. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of." I snapped my gaze to her, barely able to contain the fury simmering beneath my skin. "Taken care of? You weren't the one who took care of him. You weren't the one who cleaned up after him when he got too weak to do it himself. You weren't the one who held his hand when he thought he wouldn't wake up the next morning. You showed up at the finish line and got the gold medal for a race you didn't even run." Her lips pressed together in mock sympathy. "I know this is difficult for you." I wanted to laugh. The audacity of this woman. I turned to the lawyer. "This doesn't make sense. Why would he cut me out entirely?" The lawyer hesitated, adjusting his glasses. "Your father revised his will shortly after his marriage to Sharon. He made it very clear that he wanted his assets to pass solely to his spouse." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Greg sighed again, clearly eager to be done with this conversation. "Look, what do you want us to do? Fight it? It's legal. Nothing's going to change." I looked between them, my so-called family. My brother, who hadn't lifted a finger to help but was now acting like this was some sort of inconvenience for him. My sister, who had distanced herself from Dad when things got hard and was now pretending like this was all completely justified. And Sharon, who had won without even trying. I took a slow breath, and I made my decision. This isn't over. Sharon tilted her head slightly, a smirk ghosting at the corner of her lips. You can't fight the will. It's airtight. I met her gaze, my voice low and steady. Maybe. But I know there's more to this than what we're being told. Lauren groaned. Oh, come on. Don't start with conspiracy theories. It's not a theory, I snapped. It's logic. Dad wasn't perfect, but he wasn't cruel. He wouldn't have done this without reason, and something tells me that reason is sitting right in front of me. Sharon's expression didn't waver, but I caught it. The faintest flicker of something in her eyes. A crack. A lie. I stood up, pushing my chair back. You can all sit here and accept this, but I won't. Greg let out a sigh. Don't do something stupid. I turned to him, my jaw clenched. You know what's stupid? Letting someone erase me from my father's life and pretending like that's normal. Sharon finally dropped the act, her smirk growing. You won't find anything, sweetheart. I stared at her. And then, without another word, I walked out. Let her think she had won. Let them all think I was going to accept it and move on. I stormed out of the lawyer's office, my heart hammering in my chest, my mind racing faster than I could keep up with. The betrayal was a living thing inside me, coiling around my ribs like a vice, squeezing tighter with every breath. My father had left everything to Sharon, the woman who had waltzed into his life when he was already dying, who had sat beside him in the hospital for photo opportunities, but never for the late nights when he was gasping for air. The woman who had, somehow, convinced him to erase me like I never even existed. And yet, something about it didn't feel right. My father may not have been perfect. He may not have always said the right things, may not have been the most emotionally available man, but he wasn't cruel. He wasn't the type to turn his back on his own child, especially not after I had given up everything to take care of him. No, this wasn't just an oversight. It wasn't some simple decision he had made out of love for his new wife. Something else had happened, and I was going to find out what. I spent the next few days drowning in paperwork, emails, and old records, searching for anything that didn't add up. I requested copies of my father's will, combed through bank statements, even looked up marriage licenses, trying to piece together the timeline of when, exactly, things had shifted. But every answer only led to more questions. The original will, the one I had seen years ago, had left everything split evenly between his children. But then, 2 years ago, everything changed. That was when he rewrote it. That was when he suddenly decided that Sharon, and only Sharon, deserved everything he had ever worked for. And that didn't make sense. Because 2 years ago was also when his health had started declining rapidly. I needed answers. So I went to the one place where the truth was buried, his house. Sharon's house now. The thought made me sick. I had spent years taking care of him in that house, making sure he was comfortable, ensuring he had everything he needed. And now, she got to sit inside my memories, acting like she had earned any of it. I pulled into the driveway, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I didn't need permission to step foot in the place I had once called home. The second I knocked on the door, I saw it, the flicker of irritation on Sharon's face when she opened it. She had been expecting me. Of course she had. She leaned against the frame, crossing her arms, a lazy smirk playing on her lips. Took you long enough, I gritted my teeth. Let me in. Her smile widened. And why would I do that? I stared at her, jaw clenched. Because we both know this isn't over. A slow, mocking sigh. I thought I already told you. You won't find anything. I ignored her, stepping forward. He didn't just change the will out of nowhere. I want to see his records, his documents, his medical files. If he was in his right mind when he changed everything, I'll walk away. But if he wasn't, she laughed. A full, amused laugh. Do you even hear yourself? She said, shaking her head. You're grasping at straws. What, do you think I tricked him? Forced him to sign something? Drugged him, maybe? You've been watching too many movies, sweetheart. My fists tightened. I think my father was sick. And I think you took advantage of that." Something in her eyes flickered for just a second, and then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that same smug, practiced expression she always wore. "You have no proof of that," she said smoothly. "Not yet." I pushed past her without waiting for permission, stepping into the house before she could stop me. I could hear her protesting behind me, but I didn't care. I needed to see his study, his old filing cabinets, the places where he kept his most important paperwork. If there was a lie buried somewhere, I would find it. The house was both the same and completely different. The furniture was still where he had left it. The grandfather clock in the hallway still ticked in that slow, rhythmic way I had grown up hearing. But there were changes too. A new rug, a different set of paintings. The smell, not his smell anymore. It made me feel like I was walking through a ghost of what used to be. Sharon followed me, her arms still crossed, watching as I moved toward his old office. "You know, you're being incredibly dramatic." I ignored her, yanking open the filing cabinet. I expected her to stop me, to protest, to call the cops. She didn't, and that was interesting, because that meant she wasn't afraid of what I would find. I flipped through paperwork, pulling out financial records, statements, letters. His writing was still scrawled in the margins of some of them, little notes and reminders in his familiar slanted hand. Then finally, I found it. A document dated 2 years ago. The same day his will had been changed. A medical evaluation. I scanned the words quickly, my heart pounding. My eyes caught on a single crucial sentence buried in the text. "Patient is showing early signs of cognitive decline. Further evaluation recommended." I felt my stomach drop. 2 years ago, he had already been declining, and that was the exact time Sharon had convinced him to change everything. I turned to face her, holding up the paper. "This," my voice was ice, "you knew." Sharon tilted her head, smiling innocently. "Knew what?" "That he wasn't thinking clearly when he changed the will." I took a step forward, my grip on the paper tightening. "You took everything from him when he was already losing himself." She exhaled, a slow, exaggerated sigh. "So, what if he was sick?" she said, shrugging. "That doesn't mean he didn't love me. That doesn't mean he didn't want me to have it all." My hands shook. "You don't even care, do you?" She smiled, and it was the coldest thing I had ever seen. "No," she said softly. "I don't." I stared at her, my body rigid with fury, my mind screaming with everything I wanted to say, everything I wanted to do. But then I forced myself to breathe, to think. This wasn't just about the money. This was about the lie. This was about the truth. And I wasn't going to stop until everyone knew exactly what she had done. I turned away, gripping the paper like a lifeline. "You're making a mistake," Sharon called after me. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I walked out of that house, gripping the medical report so tightly my fingers ached. My pulse thundered in my ears, rage burning through my veins like wildfire. This wasn't just unfair. This was calculated, premeditated, a robbery carried out in broad daylight. Sharon had stolen my father's legacy, and she had done it when he was too sick to stop her. The old me, the one who had spent years sacrificing for my father, believing that loyalty and love would one day be recognized, might have walked away, might have accepted this as another cruel twist of fate. But that version of me was dead. Sharon thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. The first thing I did was find a lawyer. Not the same one who had read the will. He had been Sharon's pawn, complicit in her game. No, I needed someone who wasn't afraid to take on a case like this. It took days of searching, calling firms, explaining the situation over and over until I found the right person. Elena Vasquez. Her reputation was legendary, cutthroat, relentless, the kind of attorney who didn't just win cases but destroyed the opposition. The first thing she did after I laid everything out was lean back in her chair, steeple her fingers, and smirk. "So," she said, her dark eyes gleaming, "you're telling me this woman rewrote your father's will when he was already showing cognitive decline?" I nodded, sliding the medical report across the desk. "And I'm guessing that's just the tip of the iceberg." Elena's smirk widened. "Oh, this is going to be fun." I didn't care if it was fun. I just wanted justice. The case exploded faster than I expected. It turned out Sharon had a history. Elena's team dug up everything: past marriages, financial records, legal disputes. My so-called stepmother had pulled this exact same stunt before. 3 years ago, she had married a wealthy widower who was already in the early stages of dementia. Within months of their wedding, his will was miraculously changed in her favor. His children, who had fought tooth and nail to reverse it, had lost. Why? Because they didn't have proof of his cognitive decline. But I did, and that changed everything. Elena wasted no time filing a formal challenge to the will, citing undue influence and lack of mental capacity. The moment it hit the courts, the media got wind of it. The headlines spread like wildfire. Son who cared for ailing father left with nothing, while new wife inherits everything. I could almost hear Sharon's world shattering. She tried to fight back, of course. Released statements calling me bitter and money-hungry. Played the grieving widow, weeping for cameras, painting herself as a devoted wife whose husband's final wishes were being trampled. But there was one problem: the truth. And the truth had receipts. By the time we got to court, Sharon wasn't smirking anymore. She sat stiffly at the defense table, her perfectly painted nails tapping against the desk, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. I, on the other hand, had everything I needed. I sat beside Elena as she obliterated her on the stand. One by one, the facts were laid out. The medical report confirming my father's cognitive decline. Testimonies from nurses and doctors who had noticed changes in his behavior during his final years. A forensic analysis of the will signing, showing suspicious discrepancies in his signature. And then came the financial records, the ones showing massive withdrawals from my father's accounts before he even passed. Sharon paled when those were introduced. Elena leaned forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "Tell me, Mrs. Reynolds, how do you explain the fact that thousands of dollars were being funneled into a personal account only you had access to?" Sharon's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't know what you're talking about." Elena didn't blink. "Oh, I think you do." The case dragged on for months, but in the end the verdict was clear. The will was ruled invalid. The estate was divided according to the original will, equally among his children. And Sharon? Not only did she lose everything, but she was hit with a fraud investigation over the missing funds. It turned out, siphoning money from a dying man wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. I had spent years believing my sacrifices were meaningless. That loyalty was a one-way street. That love and devotion weren't enough. But this time, the right person won. When it was all over, I stood outside the courthouse, breathing in the crisp autumn air, feeling lighter than I had in years. I thought about my father. I wondered if, deep down, in the moments before his mind had completely slipped away, he had realized what was happening. If he had known he was being used, I would never know for sure. But what I did know was that his real legacy, the one built on hard work, sacrifice, and family, had been restored. Sharon had tried to erase me. Instead, she had erased herself.